What is up, guys? Welcome back. Me and Larson are back again after our not as successful March Madness escapades, as at least not as successful as last year. We're back with our college football win totals, and this is something we're usually pretty successful with. I know last year I pretty much broke even on win totals, so I didn't do as good as I usually do. But the ones we felt very strongly about, we had the pulse on some of these. ACC, it's changed a lot. Frankly, I don't know how I'm going to treat a lot of these teams. You'll get a team like Cal, who is one of the first teams we'll get to. They're going to have to do a lot of traveling. A lot of these guys are going to have to do a lot of traveling, especially someone like Stanford with a super low total. I don't know. This is a conference that also has a lot of middle of the pack guys. There's nobody with a win total projected over 10, and I think the lowest probably is Stanford. I think they're 2.5 or 3.5. So it's going to be an interesting year. They have a lot of interesting out of conference games, and honestly, that really leads me into Boston College. To start off, I mean, we want to talk about a schedule. They go to Florida State, then they get Duquesne at home, then they go to Missouri, and then they have Michigan State at home. That's the red bandana games that might help them out. And then they play Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky's got an 8.5 win total this year, so that is a brutal out of conference schedule.
Yeah. Yeah, and we hit Boston College last year with, what was it, like over 5.5 wins, I think.
I don't know how that happened.
Despite them losing to Northern Illinois, and then almost losing to Holy Cross and still got it through.
I think they beat Holy Cross by 2 or something, and then they somehow come out and win it.
Yeah, no, well, and they're sitting around the same spot. I think it's mainly 4.5 for their win total. Probably not going to have anything on this. The big news from them was Hafley leaving. Jeff Hafley left, went to the Packers. He was kind of the first one to do the whole college football is woke, I'm going to the NFL, which will hurt. And they got Bill O'Brien in, good offensive guy. He's good with quarterbacks, and their quarterback is Thomas Castellanos, who
he's pretty solid.
Was really solid last year. Go back and watch highlights of him against Florida State when they almost beat Florida State. He's a really good dual threat quarterback, and they basically turned into a major running offense with him and became basically a top 20 rushing team. I really like their running backs are pretty good, and they've got some weapons to throw to. I think the offense is going to be more improved for them, which should be pretty good. The defense is not going to be anything. I mean, Hafley was a defensive guy, which really sucks for the defense, but they've got some guys defensive line that could be all ACC. I wouldn't say there's a ton of experience returning. They had to retool some guys, but I think the offense is kind of going to be the big part of this team, the part where they really attack, because Castellanos can really do some good things. Like you said, the schedule.
Yeah, they'll have some spunk.
No, they will. They'll be fun. I think they could surprise some teams. Like Missouri's going to be really good, but early in the season, can they go and mess around? They're not going to win the game, but they could be close. I think they can absolutely beat Michigan State.
Michigan State. We'll get to Michigan State.
Yeah.
We'll get to them in the Big Ten. I'm very, very bearish on Michigan State, so we're aligned on that.
Yeah.
And it's the red bandana game, as I mentioned, so they always play up for that.
They don't play Stanford, Wake, or Duke, which hurt, but they also don't play Clemson, Miami, or NC State. It's really just FSU week 1. Missouri will be tough. And then everybody likes Virginia Tech this year. They go on the road to Virginia Tech, which will be kind of tough. They have a chance to make some noise early in the season, though. 4.5, it looks like juice towards the over.
It is.
I think they can win 5 games. Yeah, I think they can win 5 games. I'm not going to bet it, but you've got your Pittsburgh in there. North Carolina is low on. There's definitely a path.
Virginia's in there. I think that Western Kentucky game is going to be so important. And like I said, that's not a guaranteed victory for them. Western Kentucky is one of those G5 teams. They're like App State, which we'll also get to in a little bit. You really just don't want to tangle with. I'm surprised teams still choose to schedule them, honestly. But I think there is a path, but that is a tough schedule. And once again, Bill O'Brien, he's had success in college, but I mean, his last stop at Alabama, he wasn't exactly glistening, I would say. He was still a good coach, but obviously, how much of that is, the Alabama program itself and the talent that they have. So I don't know. I do remember texting you and be like, dude, I completely forgot that Boston College hired Bill O'Brien. So a little bit of a surprise to see him on there.
I would say if you're going to bet an over here, they've got to win their home games. Duquesne, Michigan State, Western Kentucky, Pitt, and North Carolina are both at home. Win your home games and the games you're supposed to win, and they may have to pull off an upset. I mean, they could be maybe a Louisville, North Carolina, like we said. I do think there's a path. I'm going to be interested to see how they go, because I think their offense could be really interesting, and we'll see how Bill O'Brien handles that first year.
Yeah, I'll have an eye on him. I think this is one that's too close to call. But
speaking
of another one who I'm buying, let's talk about the Cal Golden Bears, because they're another team that has a very interesting out out of conference schedule. Excuse me. They also play much like Boston College. They play Florida State early. They play them in week 4, and then they have a little bit of a weird run. But of course, week 2 they got to go to Jordan-Hare. They actually still play Oregon State this year, which I completely forgot about. But they do draw Stanford. They draw Syracuse, first-year coach Fran Brown. They do draw Pitt and Wake. I think there's a path here for Cal as well. They could beat UC Davis. They could beat San Diego State. If they beat Pitt, Oregon State, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Stanford, there's just 7 wins right there. That's not completely out of bounds, even if they lose to Auburn.
Yeah, when I was doing the research with them, I don't look at the win total until after I research the team. I kind of try to guess it myself. I was guessing a 5.5. I was really surprised to see 6.5 here, and maybe it's changed. I'll look and see if it's changed, maybe to a 5.5.
It's definitely juiced to the other. I think it's like plus 150 for the
yeah, I think I'm seeing some 6 and some 6.5, so it's definitely juiced towards the under. Another one that I'm not
juiced to the under. Yes, excuse me.
Another one that I'm not going to bet. I will say though, I kind of want to stay away from these bad teams where they have legit guys, and they have Jaden Ott, who is legitimately one of the best running backs in the ACC, and we saw last year that he was really good. I mean, they almost beat Auburn. It wasn't a great Auburn team, but they almost beat Auburn. The offense is all right. They're just going to be. He's a workhorse. They're going to run behind him. They brought in some wide receiver transfers from Notre Dame and Utah that they really like. And Justin Wilcox, I feel like has kind of been gets a lot of respect as a guy that a lot of coaches say he's kind of under the radar, and he's usually a good defensive guy, but their defense last year was horrible. So their secondary's got to improve. They also forced, here's our favorite words, they forced 28 takeaways last year, the most in the NCAA. Probably turnover regression coming there. But the defense has to get better. The schedule is really not bad. I feel like 6.5 is a little steep. I was kind of surprised. They would really have to win, like you mentioned, 7 winnable games there. They would really have to win almost all 7, because I don't see them beating Florida State, Miami, NC State. I mean, I like Syracuse a lot. I don't think they'll beat Syracuse.
Fran Brown's first year. I think Syracuse is a team that's going to be one of the most interesting teams, because Fran Brown got a ton of talent, and I think he's surrounded himself with smart coordinators. We're going to get Syracuse, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think they're one that's hard to peg as a winner, a sure win or a sure loss for a lot of people. I think they could definitely be, anywhere in that range.
If you want to bet Cal, I would lean under at 6.5 for sure. I would lean under.
I think you can get him at 6. I think if you can get him at 6 and you can take the push, I think
there's a 6 at even money right now I'm looking at, so that would be probably the bet. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Clemson. Always talking about
my
Clemson.
kryptonite last year.
Yeah, no, I wanted to strangle you almost every week when you would tell me to bet Clemson, and then they would come out and had an account. You didn't tell us they didn't have an accountant for a kicker, and that was our undoing, I think, twice. So it's Clemson, obviously, elephant in the room. Start off with Georgia. We are both Georgia fans. I firmly believe that we are going to handle them. After that, though, sleepy spot, week 2, App State. That is not a game that I think anybody wants to play week 2, App State. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
And then after that, they got to go, they host NC State. Then they host Stanford, and then they got Florida State. So this is a fast start. If this under is going to hit, it's probably going to hit pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think if there's a world. I like NC State a lot too, which is something I've said before. But is there 3 losses? Is Clemson going to start 2-3 with one of those wins being App State, one being Stanford? Would be kind of crazy. This is a team like you said, they cost me a lot last year, because I said this team is too talented to lose, these games, and they would play the games well, but they would just keep losing.
Yeah,
on paper, their offense is awesome. Like Klubnik, give him some time. He's had the last year to fix stuff. Still a 5-star guy. I think he's going to be better. Phil Moff is great. Their offensive line brings back everybody. Tight ends are great. They return 5 of their top 7 pass catchers. The offense is going to be good. It's going to be up to Garrett Riley. Can he resurrect the offense? Because he was supposed to be, this offensive guru. I'm not saying that he's not, but that's his job this year. You've got to resurrect this offense, because the offense on paper looks unbelievable. And then obviously their defense, they're known for kind of these big defensive pieces they have, and they lost a lot of guys from what was a top 10 defense last year. But Barrett Carter's the guy to know, the linebacker. He's probably one of the best in the country. Their defensive line is going to be really good. So the defense is young, but it's all 4 and 5-star guys. I mean, it's just guys who need a few downs to play, and I think they'll be fine. Like, the team is obviously loaded with talent.
I do worry about their depth. The fact that Dabo just does not use the portal at all. You know, a couple key injuries, and then what are we looking at? We might be looking at a team that loses 6 games. Now, they could win 10. I think the variance on Clemson here is extremely high. And this is going to be one of those years where if Dabo wins 10 games, everybody will be like, all right, we can calm down about the whole not using the portal thing. But if he loses 5 games, like, people are legitimately going to start being like, dude, you have to start using this. Like, I think it's going to be maybe the most interesting year in Clemson in terms of like what's going to happen probably since he got there.
Yeah. And we should say their win total is looking at 9.5 and pretty heavily due to the under, like -160. So Vegas thinks this is probably a 9-3 team. I would actually be pretty surprised if they were like, if they won 8 games, that's kind of surprising to me. But if we looked ahead and they were 11-1, like we saw, like Brandon Walker made the rounds on Twitter yesterday for saying they're going to lose to Georgia and they're going to win 11 straight and they're going to win the ACC. Like, I'm not shocked by that if that happens. Like, I think that they're good enough to be like, hey, Clemson's full of talent. Clemson can go and kick everybody's ass for 11 straight games.
Right, but are we going to be that shocked if they're 8-4? That's why I say like
that's the variance, right? It's worth pointing out too in terms of spreads, which obviously teams can be favored and lose and all that, but they're -7 at home to NC State. They're +4 at Florida State. They're -8 against Louisville, and they're -4.5 at Virginia Tech. Those are really, after Georgia, those are the 4 games. And
I got that Virginia Tech game circle. I've told you many times.
Crazy. Yeah,
I've already told you many times, man. We'll get to it. There's a path where we have 9-0 Virginia Tech in Blacksburg against Clemson, and I think that would be so good for college football.
There are a lot of sleepers in this conference. The ACC has like 3 or 4 teams that I'm like, that they could be the team that makes the leap, and Clemson could be a team that, you know, gets the brunt of that. That's going to be a great game. But overall, for Clemson, I mean, the talent is there for them to have a good season. I'm not going to bet again. I think I had them over 9.5 last year. Obviously, that did not come through. I'm going to stay away from them this year. They did have 3 one-possession losses last year in games where they were just as good, if not better, than the opponent. When, you know, the Florida State game, which was an absolute fluke, they lose that one. They lost to Miami and NC State by a touchdown. Win those games. They've got to win those games, and this needs to be a Dabo Swinney legacy year. I hope he's hearing the doubters and everything like that.
I did take the under, and it's not because I think Clemson's bad. I just see a lot of value. Granted, a lot of these games are at home, but I see number 1 Georgia. I see number 18 NC State. I see a very good App State team that's regularly in the top 25. I see Florida State. I see Louisville. I see Virginia Tech. I see a lot of teams that I think could win some games this year, and I really think. Look, once again, I'm not on the team, so it doesn't matter if I say this. I'm kind of already writing them off against Georgia in my mind. Hopefully that comes true.
Unfortunately, yeah, so, I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, which is probably not a good thing. But point stands. You're already playing. If they're in an 0-1 hole, I really like them to not win 10 games. It's just hard to it's hard to be like, oh, they got 10 games after they're going to go ahead and be in an 0-1 hole. So that's kind of how I view it. Clemson fans, don't take it personally. I bet on you a lot last year, and you burned me. So,
sorry.
Next, we're going from who will probably be the class of the ACC to who may be the ass of the ACC in Duke. Poor Duke. I was really all about these guys last year. I was rooting for them. Riley Leonard got hurt, and it was all over. Your coach goes to Texas A&M. Riley Leonard goes to Notre Dame. Now you're stuck with Manny Diaz. This is a place where I really lean to the under. I've seen a lot of people that think they're going to beat Northwestern. I'm not too sure about that, man. I bet against Northwestern last year. They damn near won 9 games. And they have to play at Northwestern on that weird new practice field early in the year. That might be Northwestern's first home game. I don't know if it is. But, I see Elon, UConn, and Middle Tennessee State. And, man, those are really the only guarantees I think I could say that are on there. And to get to 6 wins when I can only say I see you winning 3 of them, I'm going to lean to the under.
Yeah, and it's even now. When I first researched Duke, it was at 5. It was at 6, and now it looks like it's at 5.5. The under's like -125. Like you mentioned, Manny Diaz is there, and they lost. You lose your star coach, you lose your star quarterback. Your offense and your defensive line gets basically decimated by the portal and by the NFL. I mean, it was a good Duke team last year. And here they brought in Malik Murphy, 5-star guy, kind of turned my head when I was like, he's going to Duke. Like, that's kind of crazy. They lose Jordan Waters, who was their rushing leader, who's really good. We'll see him later on NC State. But they do return some of their key weapons like Jaquez Moore and Jordan Moore. Those are wide receivers who are like shifty, really good guys. They're going to get a lot of looks this year. The offensive line needs to be fixed because, like I said, they lost basically everybody on their offensive line. There was a really good offensive line. And the defense last year was really good. Obviously, Elko is a defensive guy. And, it's now Manny Diaz's turn. Like, hey, you got to step up and carry this defense now that I think only gave up like 18 or 19 points a game. It was one of the better ones in the ACC. All their guys on there, though, that they had good players that are all gone now. So there are a lot of holes to fill. I'm not going to count out Manny Diaz maybe working some magic and maybe kind of fixing the defense a little bit. Maybe they could be good. The offense is there, too, if the offense can – like if Murphy is really good, I think the offense could be fine. There are bad teams in this conference. This is not a team. I'm not going to look to bet them under. It's a stay away for me just because I think there's a world where they can click and maybe make some noise. Like North Carolina, like the projected spread for that is North Carolina -1.5 at Duke. Like Duke can win that game for sure.
Mm-hmm.
They
Wake Forest is going to be another winnable game. And if they do beat Northwestern, there's 6 right there. It should be 6.
What happens if Duke 5-0? What happens if Duke 5-0?
They could absolutely start 5-0. And then after that, they go to Georgia Tech, which is another game that they very well could win. Yeah. So, it's definitely a spot where I would stay away. I think the floor for them is rock bottom, and the ceiling is they make a bowl, I think. And, if they win 7 games, that's a huge testament to Manny Diaz, but it's yet to be seen.
It's important to note, too, they need to get their wins in early in the season because – you start with a stretch of at Georgia Tech, Florida State, SMU, at Miami, at NC State, and then Virginia Tech. I mean, they may really
not win
good teams. They may not win any of those games. So you need to get to 4 at least before your first bye.
I could very well see them sitting at 5 wins. It's somehow at 5 wins with a deciding game at Wake Forest, and being very happy to be holding a Duke over ticket because Wake Forest is probably going to be pretty rough this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I promise I do that we do have bets in this conference, but again, this is another stay away for me just because I think there's a chance Diaz could get the team clicking maybe. So we'll see.
All right, another team that's expected to contend for the ACC, Florida State with a 9.5 win total. Florida State has some interesting games on their schedule. Most notably, they play Week 0 and they play Georgia Tech in Ireland. But out of conference, of course, they got Florida, who I am not as bearish on as a lot of people are. I think Florida's being heavily undervalued. They also play Notre Dame. And I think the most interesting game on this schedule, well, maybe not the most interesting, but one of the most compelling ones that I'm looking at is a noon game against Memphis early in September that I think that Florida State better be awake for.
Yeah, and Florida State comes off a bye. They're going to get a chance to rest up from the Ireland trip, from a game against Boston College. They should be 2-0. Memphis is a team that I think we had them last year for an over, and they cashed for us, or 2 years ago. They've been good for us in the G5. Yeah. Florida State feels very 10-2 to me. That's not to say I'm going to sit here and bet an over, but like looking at their schedule, they're an underdog at Notre Dame, basically a field goal underdog, and they're going to be a pick 'em at Miami. And every other game, they're going to be favored. So that would lead you to believe Vegas thinks that this is definitely a 9 or a 10 win team. This is a very perfect win total. Like 9.5 is great.
Yeah.
-110 on both sides. A very even team. It's obviously DJU is in there now. How does he work with some of these weapons, some of these some of the chemistry? Did he get better? I think people like to trash on him. This could be like a revenge year for DJU. And they got Roydell Williams from Alabama, which I kind of forgot about. Like I
forgot about that. I saw that today. Yeah.
Yeah. That's not nothing. I mean, that could be something really good for them. And their offensive line's really good. Like I think the offense, a lot like Clemson. I mean, the offense on paper, you can look at it and say, this is a team that could score a lot of points. And their defense is nice. Patrick Payton's a guy on the defensive line they really like. They've got Marvin Jones from Athens, who should have a pretty good year. Their best secondary.
I don't think they're going to regress. They clearly lost a lot of talent, but I don't see them just falling off a cliff and not winning 9 games. And I think that's too close to call for me.
Yeah, it's still a deep defense. They've got a lot of talent. I mean, they're not going to be tested until the end of September when they go to SMU and then they play Clemson. That's really when the first test is going to be, unless Memphis, like we said, can do something. Just don't trip up here, Florida State. That's the real thing. If you want to take the over, you've just got to avoid the you got
to avoid. I think Memphis is going to be a serious problem. It's the way that they can score.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Memphis is extremely good this year. So
Yeah.
that's a G5 team you definitely don't want to play against. And who knows? Maybe Georgia Tech, who we're going to talk about next. They got some spunk. They're a team
No,
that could be ascending.
they could, and
It's a good
week
transition.
0, you never know.
Yeah.
I'll say this.
Yeah,
I'll say this. Careful stretch for Florida State here is at the end of October at Miami versus North Carolina at Notre Dame. That's kind of scary. No, and North Carolina's not great, but that's a sandwich.
Yeah, you can't fall asleep. Yeah, that's a bad. Miami, obviously a huge rivalry, and then Notre Dame. I mean, yeah, honestly, a pretty big rivalry of recent. Yeah, you got to be careful with UNC right there, especially a UNC team that's probably going to be pretty bad and looking to ruin somebody's season.
Yes, exactly.
But speaking of Georgia Tech, obviously they do open with Florida State in Dublin. Interesting game. They also get Georgia State with Dell McGee. Okay, never mind. I was reading their schedule set up weird on the website. They have Georgia State the week after that. Syracuse, VMI, Louisville, Duke, UNC, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Miami, NC State, Georgia. So it's not really a murderer's row outside of Georgia. And you look at some of the games, like they feel like a team that's really set up to win exactly 5 games. Because if you look at the games they could win, Georgia State, Syracuse, VMI, Duke, North Carolina, I would expect them to beat all those teams. But man, the other ones, Florida State at Louisville, Notre Dame at Virginia Tech, Miami, NC State at Georgia. They're going to have to pull a pretty big upset to hit that win total and win all the games that they're supposed to win.
Yeah, this is one of those teams I mentioned a while back that there are some teams I think could take a leap, and they are the prime candidate for the team that, they were 7-6 last year, but I think they can be the team that is way better this year but has a worse record. I actually was really surprised with how much I liked kind of the makeup of their team. They return basically
Eric Singleton's a really good player.
Yeah. They return like 85% of their offense, which is 5th or 6th in the country. Like the offense will be a lot better. Haynes King, Jamal Haynes is in the backfield. Their best pass catchers are all back. Their offensive line is back. They ran the ball really well last year. I think offensively they will be pretty, like, they won't be inept. Like you'll be able to move the ball, and I kind of wonder if they can give Florida State a scare week 0. I almost think they can. The question is just the defense, because defense was bad. Teams ran all over them. They've got a lot of holes to plug on that side of the ball, but I think that they can get it right. And we like what Brent Key's doing. I think he's building something. And look, they may not win 7 games again like last year, but I think they'll be feistier. I think they'll be tougher. I think they'll be harder to handle. The problem is the schedule. They play every FBS team on their schedule made the postseason last year. Like that's brutal. Like that is a tough schedule.
Yeah, like I said, it's one of those to where you're essentially, I guess Syracuse, like I said, they've been hard to nail down. You're guaranteeing that they're going to win every single game that they should, and then you said they got to upset one of these tough opponents. So I don't know. Yeah. Like I said, I don't necessarily think Georgia Tech is bad. I agree with you. I think they'll have a worse record, but they'll be a better team. Louisville was interesting last year. We were all over that because of the ease of their schedule for the most part.
Easy schedule. Yep.
Yeah, maybe the easiest schedule of all time. They open up. They should start at least 3-0 before a trip to South Bend, which is going to be very interesting. I should have mentioned their win totals 8.5. Austin Peay, Jacksonville State, and then Georgia Tech. They should win all 3 of those before traveling to Notre Dame. And then you get a little. I would say their schedule has a solid variety because they have to go, or they host SMU, to Virginia, host Miami, to Boston College, then to Clemson, and then Stanford, Pitt, Kentucky. So there's a lot of variance in there. They don't have like a big, long, just like hard stretch. They just have a couple of like good opponents sprinkled in there. I would lean towards the over. The over's unjuiced by, I think, a small amount. But this is a team that is going to have to – they're going to have to win all the games that they're supposed to win. Like we're talking about Georgia Tech. They have to – they can't trip up because Notre Dame, SMU, and Clemson all feel like losses to me, and that's 9-3 right there.
Yeah, they played Virginia last year, which was with our over. We were like, that's an easy one. I think it was tied in the fourth quarter, or Louisville had to come back in the fourth quarter. I'm like, geez,
maybe.
you can't be doing that again. Yeah, win your easy games. Between the 2 non-conference games, they should win that. They should beat Virginia. They should beat Stanford and Pitt. That's what? That's 5. That's 4. I mean, there are some easy ones on the schedule for sure.
Right, but then you look at like I said, Notre Dame, SMU, and Clemson. I call those the ones they're supposed to win. Well, that's assuming that they would upset Miami, and then they play at Kentucky, which is not going to be an easy game in my opinion.
No.
So I think Louisville may be a little bit overvalued right now. I'd probably lean the under if I had to.
They've still got. I think Braum, like Brom caught a lot of flack for some of whatever his flaws may have been at Purdue, which we definitely talked about. But the offense last year was really good. And people said Jake Plummer kind of was a guy who fell off at wherever he was, Purdue, Cal. He came in, he was really good. And they got Tyler Shaw.
Yeah.
He's been all over the place. His tour continues.
Oregon, Texas Tech.
Yeah. I mean, he's been all over the place. But they've got a really good offense with like guys they can throw the ball to. They got Ja'Cory Brooks from Alabama, who adds to what should be a pretty good wide receiver room for them. Brom's track record says that he can help inexperienced offenses figure it out pretty quick. And I think they should bank on that. And defensively, they're not too bad either. Like Ashton Gelati is the name you should know on defense because he's a defensive line. He's a first-team All-ACC guy. He's going to be a first-round pick probably. Like he's legit. They've got their leading tacklers are back. Their defensive coordinator said that their secondary is the best secondary he's been around in his coaching, his defensive coaching. Like that's big praise. Like the defense is going to be pretty good, I think. They return a lot of guys on that side of the ball. Like there's definitely room there for them to, like, they can go to Notre Dame and win. They can go to Clemson and win. +8 at Clemson is what the look-ahead line is. Like that, if you want to get a touchdown there. I just don't know what to think because, like you said, the schedule's a roller coaster. Your big game, look-ahead spot. Like I don't know. It's probably a stay away for me.
It's definitely. I don't think we've given out a pick yet, which to be
I know,
fair,
which is crazy.
The ACC is the one conference where I had the least like strong opinions of. I do have a pick. Don't worry. I do have a pick.
Yeah.
And this is one I know you feel strongly about, and I kind of feel the opposite direction.
I do.
So let's talk about Miami.
I thought I'd have to convince you on the Canes.
You're not convincing me about Miami. I can tell you what I'm taking. So Miami has probably, I would think, maybe the most interesting week 1 game. They go to Gainesville to play Florida. And this is a game that I am going to bet Florida in this game. I think Florida is not going to be as bad as everybody thinks they're going to be this year. They're at home. I think I'll take the points at home. Then they play Florida A&M, Ball State. They'll be fine. At South Florida, I don't think, but Byron Brown at South Florida is awesome.
Is it the same South Florida team as last year? Yeah, that's the question.
It's not, but they have a great quarterback. So I would just say you can ask Alabama. I don't think you want to go there. Then they get Virginia Tech. And then they play Cal, Louisville, Florida State, Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, Syracuse. That just feels like they're going to lose more than 2 of these games. And maybe it's just because I'm judging old Miami of the past. I know Cam Ward's great. I hope he's great. He's in like his 8th year of college football. I think Miami's going to be good. My main takeaway from this is if Mario Cristobal does not hit this win total, I think it might be his last year.
If this is the best
9.5. Sorry, I don't know if I mentioned that.
9.5. So let me start by saying this. I love the over here. I love the over, and I actually bet Miami over 9 -125. I also bet them to make the playoff at +260. So the 9 is a push. I love that. Offensively, they are very good. Like Cam Ward's awesome. #1 guy, I think, in the portal for the quarterback position. Damian Martinez is a monster running back. Offensive line is great. You've got an NFL prospect, a freshman All-American, and a junior and a senior who played a lot of football that are returning. Their wide receiver core is really nice. Restrepo, Jacoby George. They lost Colby Young to Georgia, who was a pretty good pickup for us. But their wide receiver core is still really good and really talented. And then they've got that tight end, Cam McCormick, who's like, it's his 9th year playing. Like, it's one of those memes. Like, he's been in college forever. The offense should totally click. The offense should be great. And then defensively, lose a few guys, but their linebackers are really good. Francis Mauagoa is their best guy there. Ruben Baines on defensive line, who's their best player. Their defensive line is a great strength. Like, they're going to be able to rush the quarterback. I love everything about, like, I look at the numbers and the on paper, the roster. I love everything. Their kicker is great. Like, even down to special teams. If this was not Miami, if you just looked at the roster and the schedule and everything like that, and you didn't know it's Miami, I think a lot of teams would really like this team to go over, and they see it's Miami and they say, this and that, and make excuses, which are fine because they've been, the Georgia Tech game last year kind of sums up everything. And the Cristobal, like you said, if Cristobal can't win 9 games with this schedule, with the most complete roster, the most talented roster that he's had, like, I don't know what you say about him. Like, it's got to be done because you need to be able to win 9 games with this schedule. Florida's tough, like you said.
It's my same argument with Clemson. Like in my mind, at least I have them starting 0-1. Like that's tough.
Yeah. That's a big game, but that's where I feel with the 9-3 is a push, and that's fine. If you lose to Florida and Florida State, Louisville's going to be tough. You go to Louisville, and Virginia Tech's going to be hard. That's on a Friday night in Miami. But
that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of their games are winnable. Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, Duke, Cal. Those are all games that they can win. I just think this is a great Miami roster with a lot of talent. I like the 9, and I think, I bet them to make the playoff. I think they can be. What if they're 11-1? What if they win the ACC? I think that it's possible. So I'm just going to bank on a big year. This is it. This is where the pieces need to come together for the Canes.
What's the Stephen A. Smith quote? That's like, I get it, but I'm not sold. It's still Miami.
I don't blame you for not taking it because it's Cristobal and Miami. And when they lose to Virginia Tech and Florida and they're 3-2, then I'm like, ugh.
I'm not going to take the under. Okay, I'll tell you that I won't take the under. I am betting against them week 1, which I probably should have learned my lesson about betting on Florida week 1 with the Utah debacle. But I think Florida at home against Miami. I think there will be a certain energy. And once again, as much as it pains me to say, I don't think Florida's going to be as bad as people think they're going to be this year.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's another video. We're doing SEC next anyway. This is a very surprising total for me because you talk about guessing win totals before. If you told me to guess North Carolina's win total, it certainly wouldn't be at 7.5. But I think I forgot to look up their schedule before that, but I think it's pretty favorable. I know they have Charlotte. I know they opened with Minnesota, which is not a game I'm going to guarantee that they win. I don't think Minnesota's going to be that great this year, but if I remember correctly, Minnesota kind of pushed them around last year. But they do have Charlotte, North Carolina Central, James Madison, who was not James Madison last year. Duke, Pitt, and Georgia Tech. So you look at, they could start 6-1. Dare I say, maybe even start 7-0. Their schedule's just easy. I don't think that North Carolina is going to be a great team.
Yeah, the roster's not. It's a fine roster. Amari and Hampton.
Max Johnson at quarterback. Ooh.
Yeah, Max Johnson's your quarterback. His tour LSU and A&M and now UNC, but he's got one of the best running backs in the country, and their running back room overall is pretty good, and their wide receiver core is nice. They lost Tez Johnson, who was their big guy, but they keep 4 of their other top receivers, and their defensive coordinator, Jeff Collins.
I was just about to say that might be the nastiest part about this team. Jeff Collins is their defensive coordinator.
8 teams scored 30-plus points on UNC last year, and their defense has been the issue forever. I think it was Gene Chizik last year.
Gene Chizik, yeah.
Their defense is the question. I mean, the defense has got to improve. It's not going to matter what the offense does if the defense stays the same. So that's Jeff's job. But it also just feels like North Carolina, even last year with a super talented team, they were in the top 10. They lost that awful game to Virginia. They lost to Georgia Tech. They just kind of fell down the stretch. But like you said, the schedule is pretty doable.
Yeah,
I think they're only going to be under 4 games.
Yeah, so here's the thing. They could lose every game. They could lose, I think, the 4 best teams that they play. Lose to the 4 best teams that they play. They could lose to Minnesota, Georgia Tech, Florida State, and NC State. Okay, well,
I think they could lose at Boston College.
Yeah, and then if you look, you're still got Charlotte, NC Central, James Madison, Duke, Pitt, Virginia, and Wake Forest. It's just an easy schedule. So it's probably one that I'm just not going to touch. But I do not think North Carolina is going to be a good team this year. I will be looking to fade them in the Liberty Bowl or wherever they're playing. I will be on fade watch. They're just not really going to be tested this year. It's just something I'm gonna choose to stay away from.
I don't want any part of this. They could win 8 games. They could win 5. I don't know.
Oh, the bane of our existence. The team that I famously picked to make the college football playoff.
And would do it again. I would do it again.
I would do it again too. The numbers all lined up. NC State. So NC State is another team that I think has a extremely favorable schedule. This is a team that I think could win 10 games on their schedule alone. So you open with Western Carolina, then you get Tennessee at home. Which if you're going to get Tennessee, it'd be nice to have them at home. Is it Nashville? Is it in Charlotte? Oh yeah, this is a neutral site game. I can't remember. You're right though. It's listed as a home game, but regardless, you don't have to go to Neyland. I guess we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Louisiana Tech, which could be a sleepy spot because they go to Clemson after that. But after that, Northern Illinois, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Cal, Stanford, Duke, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, they can win every single one of those games. They could run the table after September 28th onward.
Yeah. And sitting at 8.5, which it feels like that's been their win total the last few years. They're just an 8.5 team. It's worth mentioning last year they brought in Brennan Armstrong from Virginia, and he was
terrible,
kind of a flop. Yeah, just not very good. So they went to Grayson McCall this time, who's been kind of the big name the last few years. Coastal Carolina, everybody knows him, and they say all the talk is that he looks really good. He's fitting in with the offense really well. They got Duke's running back who's really good. I think a lot of people don't realize they have probably the best wide receiver in the conference. Kevin Concepcion is
Kevin
really
Concepcion
nice.
is a dog.
Really
That's
nice.
Why...
Get ready to learn his name if you don't know his name. Yeah. They also brought in Noah Rogers, transfer receiver from Ohio State. Their offensive line returns 4 of their 5 starters. The offense could be good, everybody. Watch out. And the defense, the NC State defense has usually been pretty nice. They've had some great linebackers. Peyton Wilson was the guy last year, and he's gone to the NFL now. But they return a lot of guys who were starters or were second string that played a lot of time. And the numbers said that NC State had one of the better defenses last year in the conference. I think it'll be somewhere around the same. The defense should at least be good enough for the offense that can score a lot. They're going to be favored in a lot of games too. I mean, I think outside of they're plus 4.5 to Tennessee. They're plus 7 at Clemson. After that, I don't think they're going to be an underdog anywhere else.
Right. Yeah. This is why I like this one, because if they drop both of those games, which they may not, they could easily win one or dare I say both of these games. You still have room for an upset. You can still clear 8.5 even if they slip up against I don't know, a Syracuse or a Cal, a Georgia Tech. If they lose one of those games, they're still gonna hit their total. So I like that. Yeah. I'm gonna take them over 8.5 wins. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid again.
This is they've never played in the ACC title game, and this not to say that they will play in the title game this year, but this is the chance for NC State to really get over whatever the hump is now. This is your chance. If they're going to win 9 or 10 games, this is it. And they avoid 5 of the top 6 teams in the conference. There's no Florida State, there's no Miami, Louisville, Virginia Tech, anything like that. So you could play over 8.5. The other one I was looking at was you could go over 5.5 conference wins and just avoid the Tennessee game altogether in case they were to lose it. And outside of Clemson, Wake Forest and Syracuse at home, they go to Cal. They can win all of those. That Stanford and Duke at home should be easy wins. And Georgia Tech and UNC on the road. They got to go, 6-2? I think they can definitely go 6-2. If they lose at Clemson, you get room for one more loss. I almost look at whatever the better odds are. Over 5.5 conference wins or over 8.5. I think it's minus 125. That's the one I'm going to play probably. So be on the lookout for something like that.
Yep, I definitely think that's a smart money, and I'm glad we're finally making some picks because it's getting worried there for a second.
Yeah.
This is the antithesis of me taking a pick, because I just Pitt football just disgusts me on so many levels. They do play Kent State and Cincinnati, which Cincinnati might be one of the worst teams in the FBS this year. Then they host West Virginia, which is a game they probably won't win. Surprisingly, West Virginia is one of the teams I was very wrong about last year. I actually said Neil Brown would be the first coach to get fired, and they won 9 games, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they go Youngstown State, and then it's not a brutal schedule. North Carolina, Cal, Syracuse, SMU, Virginia, Clemson, Louisville, Boston College. Pretty middle of the pack, it feels in terms of conference, but it's one of the things where do I feel like playing Pitt to make a bowl game with? I don't want to watch any of these games. Come on.
Yeah. So I actually played under 5.5 here. I think it was minus 110, just because this is not your usual kind of Pitt roster. Brand new at quarterback position, a first-year starter. The offense last year was dreadful. They only scored 20 points a game, and now they've got a new offensive coordinator.
116th.
Yeah, they couldn't score points last year. So they go get this new offensive coordinator who's going to come in and try to run spread, run some tempo. They brought in a bunch of Western Carolina transfer receivers. They kept Bartholomew, who's their good tight end, and Kanata Mumfield, who's their good receiver. And the offensive line should be fine, but I think it's an offense that's going to take a lot of time. I'm not impressed with their quarterback room at all. It's going to take a lot of improvement on offense to get to a spot where they can be okay. And their defense is horrible. Like their defense returns 2 starters, and they got decimated by the spring transfer portal. They lost their 3 best players to Colorado and Texas A&M and other places. It's just a lot of young, inexperienced guys on defense. Like I don't think the defense could be an issue all year. It's not going to be a defense that's going to like allow this offense to kind of blossom and grow. Like they need to produce immediately. And last year was horrible for them. And the schedule to find 6 wins, Cincinnati, I actually did Cincinnati, looked at them a few days ago. I think they could be better than they are expected to be. Like Pitt going there in week 2, Cincinnati can win that game, and West Virginia can definitely beat Pitt because I think West Virginia could be kind of nice. They should lose to Syracuse. They should lose to SMU. They should lose to Clemson and Louisville. They should lose to Boston College. Like 6 wins could be tough. I will applaud them if they win 6 games off of a 3-win season last year. But I like the under a lot there, just given the roster and the schedule. So that's a bet for me for sure.
Okay, yeah, I like it. That's a set it and forget it too. It's one of those when you bet like the Iowa, like Wisconsin under, you're like, I'm not watching this game. I'm placing the under and turning it. I'm not watching this.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about one of my favorite teams in the ACC. One of my favorite teams in all college football.
Come on.
Let's talk about SMU. Let's talk about SMU.
Pony Express.
Yeah, the Pony Express. I think SMU is being highly undervalued. I think they're a sleeping giant. I think they're going to be a very good football team sooner rather than later. And I think the schedule's favorable for them to win maybe 11 games. I think they could win 11 games this year. With their total at 7.5, I think there's so much value here. So you look, they start with Nevada, at Nevada. I'm sure as soon as I'm talking about them win 11 games, I'm going to jinx them, and they're going to lose week 1. After this, they play Houston
That would be a
Christian.
horrible loss.
Yeah, after that, they play Houston Christian. They play a bad BYU team. They do play TCU, which is an interesting holdover from, I guess, what would that have been, the Big West or whatever it used to be? Maybe they were together at some point.
Southwest, Big West, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, then they got Florida State, Louisville, Stanford, Duke, Pitt, Boston College, Virginia, and California. And I genuinely think they might lose one of Florida State or Louisville. Even if they win both, you're clearing the win total by 2.5 games. So I love SMU over 7.5.
Yeah, I do as well. The first bet that I made this summer was SMU over 8. I got minus 125 because I think, like you said, they can win 9 or 10 games legit. In terms of the roster, they returned basically every significant piece from an offense that was top 10 last year in scoring. And
Preston Stone's a great player.
Yeah, Preston Stone is probably already one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the conference. They have one of the best tight ends in the conference. They return their pass catchers. They've got some great wide receivers. Running back room is nice. Offensive line brings back a lot of seniors. Like the offense should click. The offensive line the offense in general should pick up from where they left off last year and be really good. And then the defense. This was the surprising part that I was like, I didn't know if SM had a defense or not. Their defense was top 15 nationally last year in yards per game. And they returned 9 or 10 seniors. They've got the experience and the depth for the defense to be really good. The issue is the fact that kind of worried me a little bit last year was they were 0-3 versus Power 5 programs. They lost at Oklahoma, they lost at TCU, and they lost to Boston College. Now you have a schedule full of these power programs. I'm just gonna bank on it being okay because I do trust the another year in the system, the experience with this really good both sides of the ball. Their 2 hardest games are back-to-back with Florida State and at Louisville. But after that, like you said, I think they'll start 4-0. They shouldn't have a problem with Stanford. They shouldn't have a problem with Duke or Pitt. I think it's a team that really is poised for a big season. So I played the over 8. I really like it a lot. Yeah, a lot of winnable games on that schedule.
Lock them in. Love me some SMU this year. I'll be watching very carefully. I think they're going to be easily the most entertaining team in this conference. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're one of those teams, they're just kind of hanging around. Maybe they pull off a big upset at Florida State, and they're going to start getting some real buzz after that. So I love the value here. If they lose 5 games, I'll be genuinely surprised, and I'll
oh my gosh. But yeah.
I mean, 5 games, like I said, 7.5. I don't
they can lose FSU, Louisville, and then trip up, at Duke, and you're still good. Yeah.
So, I love them. Love them. Stanford. Oh, goodness. Stanford. Yuck. Not a great schedule either. They have to travel. Was it Josh Pate that said they have to travel? I think.
Yes. No, that was Cal.
24,000.
That was Cal.
Oh, that was Cal. Yes,
Yeah.
24,000 miles, which is like
The
the Earth's
circumference of the Earth.
circumference is barely less.
Yeah.
So Stanford opens with TCU, which I've learned my lesson on TCU with openers. That game does start at 10:30 though. It's a little Pac-12 after dark throwback feeling.
Yeah.
They play Cal Poly and then at Syracuse, which is on a Friday, which does not seem like a
That's a
good travel
loss.
for them.
That's a loss.
Yeah, and then at Clemson, Virginia
That's a
Tech at home,
loss.
Notre Dame, SMU, and then they get Wake Forest, NC State, Louisville, Cal, and San Jose State. So I don't see a lot of wins on there.
No.
I think 3.5 is probably the perfect number for them. And I mean, just going back and forth across the country like this with a schedule that's already pretty difficult. I don't see the path to 4 wins, but it's one of the things to where I think they should beat Cal Poly, they should beat Wake Forest at home, and they should beat San Jose State. And I think they can win all 3 of those games. So it's one of the things where you're basically betting on Stanford to not pull an upset all year.
Yeah, and guess what? I'm going to do that. So I took under 3.5 at plus money, because, geez, I think I bet Stanford under last year or 2 years ago and it cashed for me. But this is a long-term rebuild that Troy Taylor's got on his hands. They return a lot of starters on offense. Yay. The offense was not good last year. And they get their quarterback and their wide receiver back, who are actually pretty decent pieces. Like they're pretty good, but their offensive line was horrible last year, absolutely atrocious. They gave up a ton of sacks. They could not run the ball. So you return these offensive line guys. They didn't go to the portal for anybody. I think they picked up maybe 2 guys in the portal the entire cycle. So it's relatively the same roster. And there's just no way the offense improves that much.
Lost their best player to Georgia.
Looking at their pieces. Oh, that's a great point. Like Urasek, I thought Urasek was awesome last year. Like he's a stud. I think he's going to be great for in Athens. And the offense, I think, will be dreadful. The defense was 129th nationally last year. They gave up almost 300 yards through the air. Have fun playing Clemson and Notre Dame and SMU and NC State with a secondary for 300 yards. Yeah, good luck with that. Not great. They even, if we wanted to dip our toes into the special team waters, they had a really good kicker. They lost him. They need to fill those shoes. I'm also a believer of like going to Syracuse and then to Clemson back-to-back weeks. Like that will take some wear and tear on a roster. Like that's a long trip, back-to-back weeks. I don't think they're beating Syracuse, Clemson, Vatech, Notre Dame, SMU, NC State. They're not going to beat Louisville.
They might get Cal is the only thing. They might sneak Cal, but then again, are they guaranteed to beat Wake Forest? Like,
but it's also this.
Wake Forest probably has them circled as a win.
This is also very hedgeable, especially getting 3.5 at plus money. Like, let's say they beat Cal and because
Cal will be the last game of the season. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Then they go to San Jose State, and I can just take an underdog there or something like that. Here's the other thing: they play 4 teams that are off of a bye. So they got NC State, SMU, Syracuse, and Louisville, all good teams who have byes before they play Stanford. I just hate the schedule. I hate the road trips. They're going to New York and then the Carolinas twice. Like, that's hard. And I just don't see if they pull an upset, they pull an upset. But I think, too, I wrote this down because I do like best case scenario, worst case scenario. I think there's a chance they go like 1-11. Like they could beat Cal Poly and then even San Jose State, who's the easy game, they have to go on the road and play there. I think it's a bad year for Stanford again. I'm going to go under 3.5, especially if you can get plus money. I love it.
I got it at plus money, so I'll join you. I think I got it at plus 116.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Syracuse. We've done a lot of talking about Syracuse, I guess.
Yeah.
So Fran Brown, first year, he's obviously recruited very well. The big story is going to be Kyle McCord. This is his redemption arc after he was probably told to leave Ohio State. I have no proof of that, but I have a feeling they were looking for an upgraded quarterback and told him he should probably look elsewhere. They pulled in a couple solid transfers. Who did they get from Georgia? I'm blanking. I think it was a cornerback. But obviously, Fran Brown being the defensive backs coach of Georgia, like they're going to pull some guys.
Don't forget Jackson Meeks, the wide receiver, who I forgot.
Yeah.
Go Jackson Meeks.
Yeah, Jackson Meeks. Yeah, he went over there too. I think Syracuse has a pretty favorable schedule, though, and I think they could at least make a bowl, but that's not what their win total. Their win total is 7.5. So I think they could start 5-0. That's the big sell here.
Yes.
They have Ohio, they get Georgia Tech at home, they get Stanford at home, they get Holy Cross at home, and then they go to UNLV. They could start 5-0.
Not an easy game, UNLV, to be fair. One of the favorites.
Yeah, I was going to say they could start 3-2 though if they lose to Georgia Tech and lose to UNLV. Fran Brown has never even been a coordinator, so you have to take that into consideration. And like I said, they have talent, and I think they have good coaches. But after that, you look NC State, Pitt, Va-Tech. I feel like Virginia Tech plays everybody, by the way.
Seriously, Va-Tech has a 16-game schedule.
Yeah, Boston College, Cal, and then they do get UConn late in the season. That could be your saving grace too. If you're holding on barely at 6 wins and you get them at 7, you could snatch up a UConn. But they close with Miami, which is kind of strange.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not an easy schedule, and I think there'll be some growing pains. I feel like 6.5 would probably be a better number for them. I'm not going to take the under because, like I said, I do think they could be a very frisky team, and I think they're a team that I think they're a team that could come out and definitely overachieve. But not enough for me to put my hard-earned money on it.
Yeah, I was really surprised actually when I read up on Syracuse. For starters, 74% returning production, top 10 in the country, 81% on offense. They return a lot of guys on offense, and obviously Kyle McCord is the big prize of the offseason, who, say what you want, was still a 5-star guy who can come in there with a lot of accomplished playmakers on offense. Like, their running back, LaQuint Allen, really good year. He was second-team All-SEC. Like, he's a really good running back. Aronde Gadsden's a guy who's been there for a few years, tight end. He's a big guy. Like, he's a good tight end. Wide receiver-wise, pretty decent. They got Jackson Meeks from Georgia. I have no idea what, sure he'll be good, sure, But they got this guy from Colorado State, Justice Ross Simmons, who was kind of a G5 hero, but he has been really good at Colorado State, and I think he'll fit in perfectly at Syracuse. Their offensive line, there are some questions there, but that's going to be the one place they have to improve. And they brought in a lot of guys from the portal to play offensive line. They saw those holes. They addressed them. I think the offense, I was really surprised. I think the offense can be really good. And then defensively, they changed defensive coordinators, but they kept their 2 defensive leaders and their best players. They've got 2 guys who are potential all ACC guys at linebacker and at safety. They got Deuce Chestnut from LSU, who's really going to bolster up the secondary overall, make it a lot more talented. And then they said, like on the offense, they said, where's our holes on defense? Defensive line, we need to pressure the quarterback. And they went to the portal and they got some good guys. The defense should improve based on the experience returning, the portal pickups. Like, I think it's a roster that's really solid on both sides of the ball. And the schedule is pretty favorable, like you said. Like, I think they could start 5-0. Georgia Tech and ULV is tough, but that's a team they could really click and get hot. And so I did the projections. Like, I think they can go 8-4. And I played an over 7, and I played an over 7.5 at plus money for a smaller number. But I think over 7 is a great bet, because if they click and go 5-0, or even if they go 4-1. If they go 4-1, they'll lose to NC State. They'll be 4-2, and then Virginia Tech and Miami are losses, and you're 8-4, and you win your bet. Like, I really think it's a team that can click. I like the makeup of the roster a lot. So
yeah, I think you're still in a good spot there. So
yeah,
I think it's still a good spot. A team that is not in a good spot. Let's talk about Virginia. So here's the problem with Virginia. The under, I think, is very appealing. I don't think Virginia's going to be good. I think this is probably is it still Tony Elliott? God, I think
it is. It is Tony Elliott. Yeah,
did Tony Elliott get fired? This is bad prep. But I think it's still Tony Elliott, and I think he's going to get fired. So they do start with Richmond, Wake Forest, Maryland, and Coastal Carolina. They could come out of that 2-2, but 5 games, man. I don't know if I see 5 games on the rest of this schedule. Boston College, Louisville, Clemson, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, Notre Dame, SMU, and then at Virginia Tech. That's going to be a tough one for them. He needed a lot of easier non-conference games. Should not have Maryland on this schedule,
or Coastal for that matter, who I think might be bad, but still, you don't want to go to. They're going to Coastal. You don't want to go to Coastal.
Also, didn't Richmond win the FCS championship last year?
They may have. Like, that's a respectable unit.
So really, man, I don't know about this. I might fade them week 1 against Richmond. I think that'll be fun to do. I don't see Virginia winning 5 games this year. I don't think they're going to be very good. They burned me before, but I don't think this is a very good Virginia team.
No, the stats would back it up, because the defense last year was dead last in the ACC in scoring. They gave up 33 points a game. They had a lot of guys who granted got injured last year and are coming back. I don't think that's enough to change it. If you're the defense, you just can't give up 33 points a game and start there, and we'll go from there. And their two quarterbacks are pretty bad. It's still like a quarterback competition, and their wide receivers actually their strongest room. Like they've got Malik Washington's a good wide receiver who they had last year and used him a lot, and he left, so they brought in a guy from Notre Dame. Kobe Pace is their running back from Clemson, which I keep forgetting that he went there, which feels very random because I thought he was supposed to be pretty good. Overall, offense, not many weapons on the entire team. So 4.5 feels probably like an under. I haven't bet it. I'm leaning that way, but the clock is definitely ticking for Tony Elliott. Like this has been a horrendous little experiment because they just have not been any good since he got there. They did play. I will say they played in 7 one-possession games last year and went 2-5. But I don't know. Like you would think that can regress and be better, but I don't know if will they be good enough to play in one-possession games this year against Louisville and Boston College and
an ACC that's improved. Yeah, I think an ACC that's going to be better. I don't think so. But gosh, if you're a Virginia fan, you're going to hate this. Let's talk about my favorite pick so far. I'm drinking the Vatek Kool-Aid, baby. I think they could be 9-0 when Clemson comes to town on Saturday, November 9th, and Blacksburg would be absolutely ridiculous. It's not a cakewalk there. This is not a joke. I know I hate to start it like this. They do play at Vanderbilt. Then they host Marshall. Then they go to Old Dominion, which once again, do they just play Old Dominion every year?
Like it feels like they do. I don't think they're supposed to be that good this year, though. So maybe they'll be okay. But
they're at Old Dominion. Home against Rutgers, and then they go to Miami, which is definitely going to be their toughest game, but they should start 4-0. Even then, you might be at 4-1. Stanford, Boston College, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, they should beat all these teams. Like a really good Virginia Tech team that has a great quarterback. They go to Clemson. Why did I think they played at home? Never mind. Anyways.
I wrote that they do have it at home.
Oh, it is at home. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We're an hour into this thing. You got to forgive me. And then Duke and Virginia. This is a Virginia Tech team that I am very, very, very bullish on. I think 8.5 wins is going to be easy for them. Even if they lose to a team like Rutgers, which I think could be a sneaky out of conference game right before they play Miami. Clemson is the only game on this schedule that I would circle and say I think they will lose this game, and they get them at home. And if they are undefeated at home against Clemson, that place is going to be absolutely deafening. And is Clemson going to win that game? At that point, like we're looking at Virginia Tech that like they could have an incredible season.
It's Clemson minus 4.5 for that November 9th game in Blacksburg.
And I love a home dog.
Will be a close spread for sure. The cool things with Virginia Tech here is like they're the number 1 team in the country in returning production, 86%, 95% returning production on offense, which is number 1 in the country by a mile. A lot like Boston College to kind of a greater degree. They brought in a dual threat quarterback who completely changed the offense. They went to Kyron Drones, who was really good to end the year. And when you look at the before and after of him in terms of the rushing game, it was 60 rush yards per game to then 213. Like a crazy difference having a guy back there that can run the ball. And they've got a really good, deep wide receiver group, and they're getting their best receiver back who missed a lot of time last year with an injury. The offensive line is going to be key because they have plenty of experience, but just mixing in with new guys, things like that. But I think Drones is good enough, and the wide receivers are good enough that they can move the ball in a lot of teams. The offense should be really good. And then defensively, they've got a few NFL prospects back there. 2 of them at corner. It's probably the best cornerback duo in the ACC. They were 4th nationally in pass yards allowed. So, which is what we need. Like, because I can't remember what team it was that maybe Pitt that allowed a ton of pass yards. And you're playing against these offenses that are going to be passing a lot. You're Clemson and SMU.
They're missing SMU though. They don't play SMU. They also miss.
They don't play SMU. They don't play SMU. Yeah. I think the defense is going to be really good. The defense was top 20 last year in the country and should be better. So both sides of the ball, really solid. And I'm trying to think of like the swing games here. Like Rutgers, I think Rutgers could be pretty decent too, but you're getting that game at home. They could definitely start 4-0. And I think even if they lose one, it'd probably be Miami. Syracuse, I think, like I said, is going to be tough. But there are definitely.
The thing that makes me suspicious is the over is juiced so much. You're getting plus odds on the over, which I think is crazy. I don't know what I'm not seeing here.
I would be. This is one I have not bet, and I know friends who have bet it, and I don't know what it is. There's something keeping me away from it. If you're gonna bet the over, like you could always bet the over 8. There's an over 8 minus 110, so gives you that push opportunity. But the games you need to watch out for, I mean, at Miami, Georgia Tech could be feisty, at Syracuse, and then Clemson. So there are 4 games there. If they lost all 4, you're 8-4. You're really banking on them start 4-0 and then win one of those 4 games is really the key to the over. But got to win the swing games. I think you could probably hedge this too later in the season if you needed to. But I think it, like you said, like they're going to be one of the teams that everybody loves. The roster's good, the schedule's good. I would love to see Virginia Tech win 9 games. I think it would be awesome.
Yeah, I think college football is like better whenever
when they're good.
Yeah, bringing up the rear. I know this has been a longer episode. I appreciate you if y'all stuck around, especially because these conferences are just bigger now. There's not really much we can do about it.
Although you can skip this team if you're still watching.
Yeah, you probably can. We've got Wake Forest, who once again, bad team that could start 2-0. I mean, they do open with North Carolina, A&T, and Virginia. Will probably get absolutely romped by Ole Miss, but then they play. You have a bye, and then they play a Louisiana team who's not great. And they do have UConn on the schedule, which is always seems like a free win. So I don't know. I don't have very strong feelings about this team because if they beat North Carolina, A&T, Virginia, Louisiana, and UConn, they're at 4 wins, and then you're just banking on them upsetting another team on their schedule that features North Carolina, Cal, Duke, and Stanford. So I think the over is probably the smart bet here. But unfortunately, they are now starting Hank Bachmeier, and I will never, ever, ever in my life take the over on a team that has Hank Bachmeier starting quarterback.
What a journeyman, Hank Bachmeier.
I thought he was done after Louisiana Tech. I was sorely
right. Yeah, and he was awful last year in one of those games, week 0 games we watched.
The offense that was bad.
Florida,
I remember that.
No, I think right. Yeah,
do what?
I will not forget. Wake Forest. Pretty sketchy roster. Offense was bad last year. Offensive line was bad last year. The defense actually is the unit that could be pretty strong. Their best players at all 3 levels come back, and they return like 75% of their production. So defense might not be too bad. Don't let the record won't show that, but the defense could be pretty decent, and they need to help out the offense because the offense with Bachmeier, who really outside of his 2 best receivers coming back, there's not much help there on offense. They lost 5 in a row to end the season, but 3 of those games were within 5 points. They played some close games. My takeaway from this team was you look at the bottom, the basement dwellers of this conference. I don't think Wake is totally as bad as, like, I think Pitt could be worse than Wake. I think Duke could. Stanford definitely could. And Virginia. So Wake, there are games there with 5 of their first 6 games coming at home, which will help. But I thought the 4.5 was probably a little bit low. It makes sense why it's juiced like minus 150 to the over, because Stanford, UConn, 2 non-conference games, you're at 4, and then you just need 1 more. And is it Cal?
Yeah, it's not a murderer's row. They don't have Florida State. They don't have SMU. It's just Clemson and Miami and NC State. But I mean, Stanford, Cal, North Carolina, and Duke are all winnable games for them, especially considering those are rivalry games.
I think there are actually probably 7 winnable games on the schedule. I actually wrote down there's probably a lean to the over for me if I had to make a bet on it, which I'm not going to just because I want to stay away from it. But they could win their first 2. They could beat Louisiana for 3. UConn and Stanford are 5.
And there you go. You're there.
5 right there. And then you still have Cal and Duke. So maybe there's a sneaky chance Wake Forest wins 5 or 6, but I'm not going to.
So maybe you shouldn't have skipped this section. I don't know.
Maybe you should have skipped it. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, if you've been stuck around this long, thank you so much. As obviously we're going to be doing all the conferences. We got them all lined up. The Big Ten is probably we may have to make that 2 parts. There's 20 teams. But I think the SEC is going to be up next. That's everyone's favorite that we always do. But thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back soon.